Hello and welcome back to the Welsh Women's Rugby Appreciation Podcast. My name is Huw and I am joined by the usual crew of captains and doctors, Harley, Sian and Julia. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Well, not
And
good, but evening.
yes, so
Sure is evening.
this is a slightly unplanned, unexpected emergency podcast that we've arranged roughly 24 hours after the release of the news by the Telegraph Sports of the latest sexism allegations, scandal, drama with the WRU revolving around the contracts offered to the women's rugby players for Wales, which we spoke about on the last podcast. So before we get into discussing it, I'm going to just read aloud some of the things that were written. So this article is by Fiona Thomas, who works for the Telegraph Sport. Just going to share the screen. And she broke this news yesterday. That would be Thursday in the last week in October, 1st of November, 31st of October. And the article says this: the Welsh Rugby Union has become embroiled in a fresh sexism scandal after threatening to withdraw its women from the next year's World Cup if the players did not sign new contracts. One source told Telegraph Sports the process left many players feeling emotionally unwell, and that some were even victims of bullying tactics allegedly used by members of the women's coaching team and senior management. This included Johan Cunningham, the team's head coach, who repeatedly approached players about signing new deals during this year's Six Nations, despite the fact the Women's Rugby Association, WRA, had been appointed to negotiate on the players' behalf. In widespread investigation, it can now be revealed the WRU refused almost all of the players' requests put forward, which included request for a bespoke performance-based maternity policy, upgraded salaries, a guaranteed rugby boot allowance, and nutrition supplements. Nigel Walker, the WRU's executive director of rugby, told players if they did not sign contracts in the summer, they would be withdrawn, and that it would also forfeit the squad's place at the WXV2 tournament in South Africa, and therefore the country's place at next year's World Cup in England. Players were given a final ultimatum with a 3-hour deadline to sign contracts and threatened consequences that included fixture cancellation and training removal. Abby Tierney, the WRU's executive director, did not want to play travelling reserves on match days and tried to shut out the WRA from negotiations. So that's a snapshot of what's been reported. The full investigation has been done by Telegraph Sport, and all other news sources refer back to this article for all information on it. So it's been 24 hours. I don't want to call it a cooling off period, but it's fair to say that the emotion spike that we all felt when this came out 24 hours ago has dissipated somewhat. But Sian, what was your initial reaction when you saw this news?
I've got to say, I was hugely disappointed, angry, and also not at all surprised. So there were quite a few emotions going on. I just felt disappointed from the sense of, I can't believe this is happening again, because it feels like we're just going around in circles and we don't seem to be making any progress. But there was so much of me that was just so not surprised as well. It was almost as if suddenly things started to make a bit more sense of what's happened over the last year. It's been such a weird year, I think. And all that stuff around September time, when things really got strange, now seem to make a lot more sense to me. And when you think that the warm-up games, when this suddenly was mentioned, there was a sort of, oh, there's contracts to be signed, and they haven't been signed. They're not signed. And I felt that was a bit odd because there was hardly any information about it, and there was nothing. And I think we even mentioned this on the pod before, that it was just sort of mentioned as a footnote. And not to go into too much about the men, but when there were contract issues with the men, it was very, very public. It was all over the news. We knew so much what was going on, and obviously the players had so much public support, and there was so much gathering with that. It was so different with this. It was just, hardly mentioned. There were no socials. There was no team. We were complaining a lot on Twitter that there was no team announcements, no squad announcements. I think Wales were playing Scotland in like 2 days, and they hadn't announced anything.
We also pointed out that they hadn't tweeted about it in 8 days.
They hadn't tweeted that exactly, where they still had a pinned tweet about
the men's
about the men's autumns.
Yeah.
And there was
That
just
wasn't
so
gonna
much
happen for another
weirdness
month.
about that. And it from our point of view, it did look like that there was something going on. And the players didn't look very happy either in the whole of the tournament. There was a weird stuff about the team selections were strange. Suddenly Hannah Jones wasn't picked, and okay, maybe she was injured, but it was all a bit weird. And then suddenly Kira Bevan was captain. And I don't know, there were just so many weirdness. Al Cal didn't play in the
All of the current Harlequins were not on. Neumann, Alcal, CP.
Yeah. Which is a little bit strange to me.
A little weird.
Maybe they were all injured, but it was a little bit odd. So all of that, none of that really made sense. And we know that our performances haven't been great last year, the whole year, but the team haven't looked happy at all. So now when I think back to all of that, putting that together with this insane story that's broken, it all does start to make sense. And it's a heartbreaking story. Fiona Thomas was on BBC Breakfast News this morning. It's worth catching up. I think it was just after 7. It's worth catching up on Sounds. And that's exactly what she said. It's so heartbreaking. And I think you've got to remember that these are players like livelihoods, and they were under a lot of pressure to perform anyway. And I feel like we were expecting them to perform when they were under all of that extra pressure. They had no support. I mean, I'm so gutted for the players. I'm just really, there's so many emotions yesterday because you just I feel like the players have been stitched up. They haven't been given what they need. They had no support. They're not being treated like humans almost. They're kind of just told, well, have this. And I don't even think what they were asking for was necessarily that ridiculous. They're not on multi-million-pound contracts. The contracts are. I think I was looking this up earlier. I think the average wage in the UK is about 35,000 a year. And I think these contracts were like 24k or something. Or
it was 23 to 27k.
There you go. Like, I don't think that these are massively expensive contracts. And a boot allowance. I mean,
And
maternity. This is just basic stuff.
Well, that payment to live your life, and also as a professional rugby player, we're not going to pay for your boots. We're not going to pay for your nutrition. Those are all things that are going to come out of your pocket. It's going to come out of this paltry sum that we're giving you.
100%, yeah.
And I mean,
so yeah, my heart really goes out to the players right now because I just think, it must have been. In a sense, they've probably performed better than you'd imagine under those circumstances.
Yeah. So, Julia, the details of the article which talk about the behaviours of particularly people senior within the Welsh setup, whether that be Ewan Cunningham, Nigel Walker, Abby Tierney, and things like the bullying tactics, the trying to corner players to get them to sign contracts, which is what's alleged here, the threats made about cancelling training, things like that. Can you imagine what it would have been like to be in that environment with that going on? And before you answer, I shall tell you that I have this bottle of beer here, and if I become suitably depressed, I shall open it and drink it live during the podcast.
That's
Yeah,
fine. You'll have to
way
catch up to me and Harley. Harley and I are bravely already started. No, I'm glad you asked that, and it really I think it piggybacks well off of where Sean started with it. It's absolutely a damning report. It makes you feel sick. It makes a lot of people who read it feel sick, and that kind of made me feel better almost seeing the outpouring that we saw online of support for what they were definitely going through. But what you said is absolutely right. And while it's less boring and it's less pulling at the heartstrings, I feel that at its core, this is absolutely a workplace issue. I think that as employees, and I feel that it's important now to distinguish these women as employees of WRU, because that is a big component of having contracts. It's all well and good that you're a contracted player and that you can say that, and that, that's a lot of what Nigel Walker rode on for a while. He rode on the high of we're giving them contracts or whatever. But the other side of giving humans contracts to work for you, and for lack of a better term, them owning you and your body and your time, is that it is your responsibility to provide things like safety in the workplace, like these tools that you need to succeed as a professional athlete. What WRU went ahead and did is say, not only do we not view you as worth that, while we tell you that, we are going to make you feel as bad as possible. And that's what it reads like happened. And that's really what got to me the most. And it is kind of my own personal leanings and my own rights fights that I like to have in my off time. But workers' rights are important, and it is important to consider these people as labor, because this is no longer, for the longest time you could put them aside, and lots of people who are invested in Wales men's rugby did cast them aside as just, they're kind of doing this part-time. They're all nurses and teachers and all of that, and they're just like playing rugby for fun, which was bad enough. But now you don't even have that. So now there's really no excuse for we treat them like shit. And not only did they treat them like shit, they said, by the way, if you point out that we treat you like shit, if you tell anybody that we treat you like shit, and if you try to change us from treating you like shit, we will take all of the toys and go home. So not only was it bullying, not only was it coercion, but it was cowardice. And to find out from Fee's article, just from what we gleaned from there, that people who are very close to the process, like Huw and Cunningham, were involved in this. I am surprised that people aren't more mad. I feel that, and I know that I bring conversation this way a lot. I feel that if this happened in America, things would not be as polite as they have been today. I think heads would have rolled much faster. I'm surprised they haven't. I know we're going to talk about that more. But I think it is inarguable that people need to go.
Harley,
we know that now.
we've in Welsh rugby, we're used to WRU related shenanigans. Obviously, you and I cover the men's game as well, and we're used to this. Well, we're not used to this. We're not used to this at all, but we are used to a drama every other week about it. We've had big reforms at the WRU. Does this show that nothing's really changed?
It certainly looks like that. I mean, I did just before I finish off that, I did want to bring up the thing with the boots. So something that's being brought around is actually a lot of players do have to buy their own boots. But that argument doesn't really wash when you're saying that women can't have some money to buy new boots. A couple of days, this news comes out a couple of days after an announcement video where players are going through what is easily a couple of £100 worth of stash each, and you're saying, no, you can't buy a pair of boots. I mean, rugby boots are expensive, particularly if you want to get higher end ones. I don't know what the sort of price range the women's players are using. I'll be honest, I don't really look. I've got myself 2 pairs of boots and they total about £80. But that's still 2 pairs of boots for me for one. That's one player.
But it's absolutely a
and they last me about a year.
And importantly, you are not wearing them for 6 to 8 hours a day, at least 3 days a week.
Exactly, I wear them, a couple hours a week. I mean, grassroots, there's a little bit more stamping going on with the boots, but that's by the by. And just accidental treading on toes more than anything. As for no, there's also an awful lot. There's a lot of intentional. There's an awful lot of accidental, especially when you play as badly as me and some of the people I've played with.
Sean's
the
scrum half,
WRU
she'll never
changes.
admit wrongdoing.
It just smacks of the exact same thing. And I know we're going to get onto the WRU response in a bit, so I don't want to go too detailed. But like their answer to it is like, yeah, well, we want to. And you know what? Maybe you're right. This thing has no root in sexism. Maybe it's just because they just do not care and they see all their assets in terms of the players as cattle.
Yes,
because it basically seemed to be what they're trying to do by trying to tell the unions, well, all that debt we leveraged on you, we lumped on you just so you wouldn't go bust because we didn't want to pay you for player release during COVID. Yeah, we'll make it go away, but we want absolute say on where players play, how long they play for, who you're allowed to sign.
True control over a human. Yes. Yeah,
it's just exploitation. It just is, and maybe it isn't complete sexist, as I said. Maybe it's just maybe they're just stupid. But I mean, I feel like we were on to a loser when to bring in about change of culture and stuff. We brought in someone who was appointed to change culture for the Tory party, and I'm sorry, have you seen it?
I'm sorry, that was a great line.
I couldn't possibly comment.
Yeah. Damn. It's
Yeah,
so
I mean,
true.
Sean is
'cause,
reaching
the,
for
I was gonna say, the post office
impersonality.
she was
Oh,
running before this,
no.
and
I'm
Impartiality.
she's
impartial,
got a
so
great
it's just
reputation. But and I'm barely into the rum yet. It, it's just baffling, and and it's all the same things of we'll listen with this, but I mean the big point is that everyone gets the thing that it's not so much an elephant in the room, because the people who care talk about it, but no one else does. If this was the men's game, we would not be getting this far with contract negotiations, because as soon as the players even consider going on strike, that's it. News off, there's a
Yeah.
huge press conference because all the journalists get in, and I'm just wondering if you haven't been the feed Thomas with this got out, like, who are the eminent Welsh-based female journalists? Like, is there a women's rugby specialist at Wales Online? No, there's barely
No.
rugby specialists there. BBC Wales, there's no secret that the sports section's being cut to its bare ass because the corporation's going bust. Fuck knows what sport in Wales are doing. That just seems to be a vanity project of two former players. So it's
We
all
know
about
Just
getting
doesn't seem to be
on.
anyone championing the Welsh women's rugby team from the media perspective, is there?
Yeah.
Exactly. And we know a lot of them end up having to rely on wherever, and of course, as we know, most of them play in the PWR. A lot of them have started relying on wherever their PWR club is, their local folks, because even, some of us in the chat are Bristol fans. I'm a Bristol fan. And I know a lot of them will just go to local journalists and talk about it.
Yeah.
It's simply not good enough, and I'm glad, I guess, in a way, that this is exposing that there need to be more, first of all,
Yeah.
rugby
We'll-
experts. Oh, sorry, in the media.
No, sorry. We'll talk. I do have it in the script to talk about journalism in Welsh rugby, so we'll come to that in a bit.
Yeah.
Just want to talk some responses around social media. So you alluded to it, Julia. There's been a huge outcrying on social media, none less so than Jem Hallett, former Welsh rugby player, says, "Wow, I'm floored. This is the most unexpected, disrespectful thing to happen since the last time something disrespectful like this happened. Never not disappointed by the lads in HQ." And she goes on to do quite a lengthy thread. Former Wales captain Melissa Berry also spoke about it. Welsh Women's Rugby says, "Wow, just wow, when you think the worst is behind you." Stella Mills says, "So how can things go this wrong?" Back the Girls podcast, trying to find their comment here. Shout out to them, big love, great podcast. I can't find their response now. I'll find it in a second. But just generally,
I know they will be equally angry. So
yeah,
keep an eye out for
absolutely.
them.
And we
Yeah.
will be listening. Here we go. Found it now. If anyone involved in this situation would like to discuss it on the podcast, that would be brilliant. But of course, if you don't want to be named, then I would happily share your story anonymously. So get in touch with them. I know they've been going a bit longer with us than us. So all love to them. Yeah, and I could go on and on and on. We've had loads of responses to our tweets that we've put out via the official pod account and individually as well. From my point of view, the particular one that shocked me was Nigel Walker allegedly threatening to withdraw the team from the Women's World Cup.
Yeah.
I really hope
For
you
not-
speak on that.
Yes.
You spoke really well about that on Twitter.
for not signing the contracts. It's unbelievable to me that someone who works for the national union for any sport would even think of withdrawing their team from the World Cup. It is literally the definition of unthinkable. It undermines your sole purpose for being, your raison d'etre. How can you possibly claim to be acting in the interests and the best wishes of your sport? What are you doing? You're the head of you are the head of a sport for a national country. To remove that country from the international stage on the biggest stage is treason to the highest order as far as sport goes. It's an unbelievable thing for it to it should be, if he had a doomsday scenario in his head, assuming this is true, assuming he had a doomsday scenario in his head of the players refuse to play, then the plan he should be coming up with is, oh my God, what do we do in order to make sure Wales are represented at the World Cup? Rather than, okay, we just won't go to the World Cup then. Like, it's if there's any one action that makes you unfit for purpose, it's this. What does that press release even look like? Hello, everybody. We have withdrawn from the World Cup because the women wouldn't sign the contracts. I'm sure you'll all agree with us that they're
Exactly.
being totally unreasonable, and you'll back our decision to not participate at the World Cup. Like, people have been saying to people who don't even know rugby have been saying to me, surely World Rugby would investigate the WRU for doing that and sanction them.
It feels like a specific that specific threat and the idea that they might even follow through feels like a very, if you've ever had overbearing parents, anybody with overbearing parents out there, if you've ever had overbearing parents, you may or may not be familiar with the abuse tactic of threatening to take away something incredibly important to try to make somebody get in line or make them perform really well. It almost never works. All it does is give them PTSD. They already have that, which we know, and it feels particularly egregious that they did this. And many people have pointed it out, but the last time that we did this, like Jem was joking about, was a year ago. It was not long ago. I think we were very close to all be like, this is to being friends. This is not long ago, and it was bad enough then, and there were all of these platitudes given and all of these promises made, and it's taken only a year to turn out that all of it was bullshit, and in fact what we decided to do was get worse.
Yeah, I think was it Melissa Berry who said on that tweet that she didn't think it could have got any, like, we'd already passed the worst point, you know? That's exactly how I felt. I was kind of like, no.
That's what Nigel Walker promised us. He promised straight up. That's what he said in his press release last year when he was appointed to do all this. That was what he said. He was like, I'm here to make sure that none of this ever happens again.
Exactly. It's just so demoralizing.
It's a slap in the face.
To be basically like, oh no, it's like, no, Sian, this isn't the worst. Actually, wait till we got what's coming up next.
You want the worst? We can make it worse. And that feels like an abusive parent. I'll give you a reason to cry. You want to cry? I'll give you a reason to cry.
I gotta say, right, I've defended Nigel Walker in the past. So Nigel Walker was a hero of mine when I was a kid. So when he actually became at the top of the WRU, I was kind of like, oh, Nigel sorted out. Nigel's a nice guy. He was always a lovely chap when I was a kid and used to meet the players and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, honestly, he seemed like a really, really decent guy. So this, like, yeah, that was part of what really upset me about yesterday, actually. I was like, I kind of feel like he was one of my heroes and you feel kind of like let down.
It was all lip service.
And it was all 100%.
Yeah, it puts a very different reflection looking back on some of his quotes. Go on, Harley.
I mean, one of the things I wanted to hop on was basically because obviously we pointed out that the Women's Rugby Association. So that's actually the English. That's actually an English body for a start, because a lot of them play in the PWR.
I'm ready to go off on this.
It just showed, and they were told they weren't allowed in the room. So this basically smacks of what happened with the contract negotiations with the men, where they wanted to ignore the WRPA. First of all, so, basically saying, well, clearly you still haven't decided that you want to listen to Welsh union power, which is a very weird look in a country built on unionism. Just saying, there's a reason why the UCU in a sector which is quite middle class and anti-Tory has very strong very strong membership, very strong strike. People are actually going on strike when they vote for it in places like Cardiff and up in the north. Like, there's a cultural reason for that. The other thing is, why aren't the Welsh Rugby Players Association like? Is it just for men? Because there's nothing to say it's just for like why.
That is a question that we have
that's
hanging right now.
That's one of the things we've pointed out is when shit was bad for Ireland, we had there was an Irish player who basically got dropped for a couple of games because he spoke out about it. There were some issues with the South African women, and you get Sian Khaleesi coming in to show support.
Where's ours?
Where are the Wales men's players? I know they've got their own shit to be dealing with. I wasn't expecting them to turn up at the WXV when they're all playing their own games in Wales, because that's a hell of a long flight just to do a show appearance. But the noise has been deafening. And I don't know if it's basically because whatever same thing is stopping the current Wales women players speaking out is applying to the men as well, which just further entrenches this toxicity. But like, come on, there's a few who've recently retired who should be coming out in arms and saying that this is just, this is just typical of what we've seen or whatever. Other on the whole thing of like, because we've had responses saying, "Oh, where's the evidence?" And when like, goes what Huw said, who on earth comes up with who on earth imagines something like Nigel Walker, someone who's supposedly bringing in to fix this? Oh no, we're going to pull you out of a showpiece. It just doesn't compute. Like, there's a lot to be said for waiting for established evidence. But sometimes, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck,
and by the way, it was a duck last year.
This is the thing as well. You've also got track record of it.
You have a horrible track record, and it is recent.
Yeah. So just to
reminding us.
go on the comment, what you alluded to there about the WRA. So it says that with the talks stalled, the WRU then changed tack and tried to discourage players from using the WRA and offered to pay for different independent advisors. I don't know anything about employment law, but that seems like a kind of thing that should be not legal.
I do, and it's not.
It is.
I feel like
just hang on. I'm just going to read this bit. I'm just going to read this bit. It is now known that the team's preparation leading up to the competition, that competition being WXV, was disrupted after the WRU escalated contract negotiations. The WRU the WRU issued the threat of disciplinary action after the players refused to attend a meeting at the National Centre of Excellence about contracts. The invitation was not extended to the WRA. Despite the WRA first making contact with the WRU representatives in early February, players were cornered, but individually by members of the coaching management who attempted to talk them into signing deals.
Ugh. I almost, parts of me almost wish, only because I don't know UK law nearly as well as I know American employment law, but God, I wish this happened here, because they would be sued by 3 different parties. This is insane. You can't tell somebody that they don't get to have their own negotiating representative. This is insane. No, they wanted to corner people that they don't know their rights. A lot of these girls or a lot of these women are young. And if you get them alone, they can't talk to each other and come up with a plan. It's genuinely what, like, the Pinkertons, like, this is strike breaking. You
do get a sense of it's like the power of a load of old guys or older men over, more naive younger women. Yeah, exactly. Intimidation.
Yes. I'm in charge of your entire employment. I'm in charge of the rest of your political career. No, none of them are going to fight you. That's coercion.
Yes. So let's get on to the WRU response then. So there was a WRU response given in the Telegraph article initially, which is from Abby Tierney, which says, in September this year, the Welsh Rugby Union proudly issued 37 new full-time professional contracts to Wales women players.
None you can live on, but they sure did.
The move for the first time included many extended 2-year deals, because 2 years is a long time, and makes Wales women one of the best played international teams in the world game. The Telegraph article suggests that these deals are worth between £24,000 and £30,000. The WR board were made aware in August by the players that they had concerns. So remember that it says that the WRA approached the WRU in February. The WRU board were made aware in August, is what the WRU say, by players that they had concerns with the contract negotiations. The WRU welcomed this approach, and the WRU chair immediately initiated 2 work streams. One was completion of the negotiations, which feels like the work stream that was already happening, with a core team, and the second was a board-led review. We shall discuss that in a second. The WRA themselves have issued a statement. When Abby Tierney got involved in the process, she approved the payment of the travelling reserves, match fees, and engaged regularly with the WRA. They go on to say that they are proud to represent the women of Welsh Rugby, and I've got it here. We are proud to support and continue to give PWR players and our work with the Welsh squad. However, it wouldn't be appropriate to discuss the detail of confidential negotiations. We wish the Wales squad the best of luck in their preparations for the Six Nations and the World Cup. Now, I think they've gone on to expand on that in the BBC article. So I'm going to cover the BBC article next. I'm not sure who got hold of this first, but I think we first all saw it in the BBC.
Mm.
I
So
think so.
this there
Well,
isn't
that was
a
way
name
shocking
against
to
this, I
me.
don't believe. So the Welsh Rugby Union is to apologise. Always
So they're not. They haven't yet.
They haven't yet, no.
they
They plan
it
to,
has
maybe.
They're
it
coming
has
up with
come
it.
Sweet.
They don't know what
Tomorrow.
they don't know what they're sorry for yet. They need to talk to their
yes,
lawyers.
it has come out in the news that they have done something wrong and they are talking about
It
maybe
turns out.
apologising. WRU Chair Richard Collier-Wood and Chief Executive Abby Turney admitted serious failings in the process, and it was absolutely clear the governing body should say sorry to the players. This came out 24 hours after the Telegraph article. The Abby Turney had already, as I said, issued a statement to the Telegraph, which was printed in the original article. This is a subsequent statement after the article came out. This is not Richard Collier-Keywood said, "This is not a good day for us. We totally accept that. We should have done better and we didn't, but we have learned our lessons and we will keep trying to improve." I should note that this BBC article is interspersed with links to the articles from last year where the sexism scandal was top billing in all the
I
news
was going to say
publications around
it
the
should
world.
also be really damning in the middle of this article is that article, if you scroll right back up, about only in late June that they were going to save Welsh rugby.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Interesting.
I know.
So the WRU, as they said, have initiated a review into the process, in which they have announced some of the early findings, which include the WRU process for contracts failed to take into account the growth and rapid change of the women's professional game.
Parentheses that they're worth any money.
What? That
The
doesn't make any sense to me.
Parentheses that they're worth any money. No,
The
they
WRU executive leadership accepted it was a mistake to issue a 3-hour deadline.
we shouldn't have threatened them.
Strongly differing views on how to develop women's rugby in Wales.
We shouldn't have threatened them.
Players were inexperienced at contract talks, but were left isolated, which is what someone mentioned a second ago. Players considered strike action before the friendly against Scotland. The number of articles I'm reading about players threatening strike action these days is unbelievable. A lack of clear communication or transparency around the contract talks, which again we alluded to a few moments ago, which created heightened emotions. It's bloody women for you, isn't it? You know, always just so emotional.
I
Don't
can't have a
get us
baby. I
started.
can't have a baby. I don't have boots. No one's paying me. You're threatening me with not going to the World Cup.
Oh, you're so
Worse-
emotional,
Women
Julia.
are always
Stop being so
saying this.
emotional about
You're
rugby
being so
boots.
emotional about going to the World Cup.
Made worse by poor
Sorry.
behavior from all parties at different stages.
And
Always
These girls were mean, by the
always
way.
invoke Donald Trump talking about race riots when giving
Very, very
feedback.
mean. Very, very mean, he said. Michelle Obama was very mean to me.
Yeah,
And so-
sexism was not part of the motivation for any failings. Collier-Keywood went on to say there are some sweeping criticisms in the report as well as some strong recommendations. They had 36 recommendations, but a year ago. And the Telegraph article suggests that those 36 recommendations have not been taken on board despite the WRU agreeing to do so. It is absolutely clear that we do need to apologise and engage with the national players. If only it was a few weeks ago when you had them all in the same place. He added that Executive Director of Rugby, Nigel Walker, involved in the initial negotiations, had accepted things should have been done better. On the allegations of sexism, the WRU independent board members Alison Thorne and Claire Donovan, tasked with carrying out the review, said that while there had been poor behaviour, sexism had not been apparent. This is Claire Donovan speaking. I've reflected on all of the conversations we had with all involved over more than 50 hours, which is more than a working week. and that sexism did not come out. I had a 15-year playing career in rugby at a time when sexism absolutely was very much part of how teams were treated, but I honestly did not get a sense that this was part of the grievance or the decision making. It was potentially a lack of respect and a lack of understanding, a lack of respect towards the women, but not the men, and a lack of understanding of the importance of people's position of power over that of the employees. There is a real this didn't seem so bad when I was reading it in my head. There's a real determination to make things better for the Wales team, but we have lost our way in some of the conversations going forward.
How?
I mean, I'll pause there for a second, and I'll ask anybody can respond to this. If not sexism, what was it?
Well, I mean, you could always say never confuse incompetence with malice.
No,
and
that's
as I
exactly
said,
right.
they seem to be so utterly contemptible towards everyone who isn't Team Wales, and particularly Warren Gatland.
Well, and they are absolutely against. Okay, I need to reel back. They're probably not against the idea of workers having rights at all, but I kind of, in like a horseshoe theory way, like kind of agree that it probably wasn't sexism this time, only because they treated the men this poorly. They I mean, not as poorly. It always has to be a little bit more poorly, but there was malice
They're
and
so
incompetence.
incompetent. I think
There was malice and
that's
incompetence with the men too, and the men
Yes.
have and they have a different antagonistic relationship with WRU. That's for a different thing. You guys have several pods. There is a bit of antagonism between Wales men's players and the WRU. Okay. It all kind of seems pretty fair, but that's from an outsider. Because I don't know enough about that. But this isn't new. And honestly, the way that you treated the men and how public it was and what we saw happened is really only more proof that probably what was said here about the women is probably true.
I
You
think
did
they
it
just seem
already.
to. It's like an overbearing headmaster talking to
I
kids.
told you, the overbearing parent.
It's
That you
just
think
this,
that you are, the parent.
that we know better than the players and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
And
these
to be
little
honest,
idiots.
there's something about some of that response is a little bit like a narcissist relationship.
Yes.
You know, when the bully's
Yes.
kind of gaslighting a little bit. I don't know. It just but
Oh, it absolutely is. There's absolutely an essence of that when you are telling these like 19 to 20-year-old women that it's just like, oh, don't worry your pretty little head. I promise you this is a good contract.
Well, former Wales wing
also
Jess
want to bring
Kavanagh is
up
quoted in this BBC article. I hadn't read this. This has been added subsequently. She says,
Pop it
we've
back
been
on the
hearing
screen.
apologies for years about different things happening in the WRU. Apologies mean nothing until we see change. The girls are still not happy with the contracts, and to be forced to sign your contract is blackmail in itself. These are the words of Jess Kavanagh. We
dope.
in 2024 shouldn't have that happening in any workplace. It's hard to come back from things. Do they still have the same respect for the staff? You've got to respect and want to play for these people.
I think that is so perfect. It just sums everything up for me.
And
I
by
think
the way, that's another former player who is
yes,
seriously in a really who is partnered with another former player. They know firsthand.
I just can't. I'm exhausted by all this. It's if something else happens and it's awful and oh no, this is terrible. It'll never happen again. We're so sorry. Well, not really that sorry, but but just nothing ever seems to change. And honestly, I am so fatigued by the lack of. There doesn't seem to be a real. It's fake. It's empty rhetoric. It's a complete kind of. Oh, we'll just tell them this. It's words and not following up your actions.
Quintessential. Well, no, I guess it's not quintessential gaslighting yet, but it is like the road to it. I'm about to lie to you about what I did or didn't do.
I'd like to
I'm just really tired.
When they claimed, because they claim that they're the best paid women's contracts, which could be true.
Oh, remember that article that we were all frying earlier?
I think a big part of that is because most women's teams are still amateur or semi-professional. But also, the upper, now bear in mind the upper range now. So you're probably talking about your captain. So, you're probably looking at maybe Kira Bevan as one of the more experienced heads. You're looking at
Jazz Joyce.
Jazz
Jazz
Joyce.
Joyce, Hannah
as a start are getting this 30k.
Alcal.
The
Yep.
median salary for a woman in Wales is £29,900.
Several of them aren't making that.
Like,
Yeah.
you know, like this is where we are, and this is the median, not the average. So this is one that does
Yes.
skew into all the people on minimum wage now.
Yeah.
Which actually, this isn't too. I mean, I don't know roughly how many hours a week they work,
Fair.
because that, you know, because obviously minimum wage is calculated on a minimum rate.
Yeah.
And it's
Uh,
and by the way, actually, that is a part of this narrative, is that it's very hard to quantify what work hours are for professional athlete.
Because
Which
surely
should
it's
make
close
you
to
wanna-
5-6 days a week.
Right,
Because
which should
they've
make
got to
you
be
want to
constantly
err on
thinking
the
about
side of
nutrition and
workers' rights. Exactly.
S&Cs. But I mean, it's a different conversation that the median salary in the UK for a woman is 31.7, but both of them are about 3-4k short of men's. But that's a different conversation, which I'm not getting into this time. But it is still, well, there's still no reason why they shouldn't be earning the same. But you're looking at this and you're like, they're trying to tell us all these things. And remember what Nigel Walker said when he was sort of like and the whole contracts, and the first breakdown was Wales women. He wants Wales women by the 2029 World Cup to be a contender. So he wants them to be as professional as possible to compete with the likes of your Red Roses, your France, your, you know, basically everyone in WXV1. That basically that's where we should be. They can't even string together a game plan like on the on-field stuff, but they can't even treat them with the respect they need to feel safe in their employment to actually perform. Like, there are countless
100%.
studies out there that show that if you are not happy in your job, or you are not secure in your contract because they're threatening to change it and go move around and do all this, that, and the other, you are not going to perform in your job well. And that doesn't matter if you are an elite athlete, or you are a secretary, or you are a chief accountant somewhere. Like, if you feel like you're not being valued, you will not want to put the same effort in. And you're not seeing it. Like, it's quite clear to see what it takes to make a professional environment. And if you look at Wales men, like, they did a thing when they showed, like, when they went to South Africa, and like how much was it, and it was something like 50,000-60,000 pounds worth of supplements for their dietitian, which they just said, no, we're not going to pay for the women. If you want supplements, you pay for yourself, pay for your own.
By the way, we still want you to be a contender by 2029, even though you
we
are
want you
building
to
your
take
body
the
now.
supplements, we want
Even though
you
you're
doing
building
those
your
gyms.
body right now.
If it wasn't for the fact that I know World Rugby pays for travel and accommodation at World Cups, I'd expect them to be paying for their flights in 2029 to Australia. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if they were given a 50 quid fuel vouchers if they were, you know, a Division 5 Central team. It is shocking. It just is. And, you know, Huw said on the top of the pod, now we've had time to cool off emotionally. I don't think I have. If anything, I'm more angry because I had more time to think about how just utterly vile it is. Things like just thinking, you know, I half expect to find out that they've all been lift sharing or having, you know, crowdfund, you know, in a few weeks, you know, by this, if this had come out next Six Nations, there'd be crowdfunding for the petrol to go up to Scotland. Like, none of this makes sense, whether you're thinking of it as a business, like business-wise, or elite sport. And Nigel Walker was brought in because of a background in elite sport performance.
Yep.
We're going to go on to like changes and things, but ultimately he's got to carry the can for that, because he was there when the first scandal came out about women not performing, about the men's not performing, everything just not performing, and he is there as director of rugby for the whole of the WRU. So if the rugby side of things is not going well, that's his head on the block, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, there are plenty of people who said the whole thing should have been
the
gutted.
men's
when
team
the
finished
Plymouth
bottom of the
Chiefs
Six
did it.
Nations, and the women's team finished bottom of the Six Nations. And
We are
the
not
20s
doing
just
well.
about finished above the bottom.
We are not good.
well, compounding that though is that recently we actually did quite well. So we know that it's possible, which is really more damning upon the management and the coaching.
Do you mean the women now? Because I think
the women.
Yeah,
women
so
even the
were
men
in third
won
place last.
the men won a
I
Six
think-
Nations 3 years ago.
Right.
I think some of that success was partly. I mean, I think there were.
Just to say, the success was
was a-
finishing third.
Right. No, I know.
Yeah, right.
But-
Okay.
but
yeah,
also-
but for us,
Context,
but the
we
gap-
have been
the
a lot
gap-
worse
it's
again.
not like Scotland
The
finishing
gap
third
is
every year
much.
in the men's.
The gap is much wider between.
But like there were some
anybody
good
in France
progress
and
made
England.
when they started bringing in the contracts and everything. I think a lot of it was also the fact that Ireland and Scotland were in a bit of a
We're so behind.
were
and they're not.
were chaotic, to be perfectly honest, like where we were as well. So yeah, and now obviously that we've talked about this a million times that they've caught up loads and just steamrolled ahead of us.
Those two of them, while they had rocky roads as well, and they both had their own both unique and also awful things that happened.
Exactly.
Theirs were just longer, or those were just further in the past. But if we think about like what happened with Scotland and what brought them to here, and what happened with Ireland and what brought them to here, honestly, there's a lot to worry about. Honestly, if you look at Ireland, and we've talked a lot about that offline, there is a lot to worry about when you look at Scotland if we are really going to follow that very steep, very rocky road up.
I feel like we were talking
There's a
about,
lot of
oh,
risk.
we've got to catch up with the Red Roses, blah blah blah. But I feel like they're so far ahead now. We're gonna be
We need to catch up
struggling
with
to
Scotland.
Ireland
We need
and
to catch up with
Scotland.
Scotland.
Because Ireland are way ahead now, and yeah, Scotland are they're doing really well.
Yeah, Ireland are on a hot streak. I'm not sure if everything is as solid, but I mean, there are a lot of hints that say that Ireland is probably on an upward trajectory. Scotland learned a very hard lesson. It was a very sad lesson. I am, I'm glad that something like that wasn't what had to happen for Wales, but this is pretty close. It's not as bad.
I just want to see a strategy from the WRU. They keep saying we have an amazing team, and it's like, well, where's the strategy? It's just
there
all
needs
empty
to be more
words.
strategy than saying we have a new strategy, because remember, we had a whole podcast episode about that fucking PDF. We did. We went through the whole PDF. None of it meant anything, and we joked about it the whole time. But we even said at that time, like, it sure seems like a lot of this is empty.
Yes.
And boy,
and then
was
you look at what the FAW are doing with Cymru women's team, and they've got everything planned out, and it they actually have a proper
with not
strategy.
that much more money. With not that much more money than WRU, by the way.
No,
I looked. It's not too much more. But
yeah, Harley. Moving on to the next topic now. So this is something that we alluded to earlier, that this story, it was broken by Fiona Thomas of the Telegraph, which is obviously an English publication. We've spoken between ourselves on this podcast previously about the lack of coverage for the women's team in the Welsh press. What does this saga tell us about the rugby press in Wales?
I think for me, I've always thought that it's not. I mean, we've got to accept that as a country we are a much smaller population. We're smaller than like regions of England, like that we've got to accept that. That doesn't mean that the journalism we do have should be at a lower standard. I mean, we're talking about our main source of news in terms of rugby sense is Wales Online. Yes, BBC Sport, but that gets updated up and down before you need to cuts. But Wales Online is there, and you look at all you have to do is look at their rugby headlines post things. And the other day I looked at it, and it was about France having their, so these are the Welsh rugby headlines. So France having an alcohol ban, Stuart Hogg being made captain of playing 10 for Montpellier. Right. So far, I've not had any Welsh stuff. There was a bit about Lewis Rees-Zammit, who's no longer a rugby player. I mean, he's Welsh, so we're moving in the right direction. But it's very it's the Welsh rugby part of the rugby the rugby part of the section is almost ironic. It's it's like yeah, we all talk about anything other than rugby. It's like a lot of rugby podcasts, to be fair. But it's just not like there doesn't seem to be anyone hard hitting. There's never like regular news. You don't hear about. Like there were no articles about Jazz Joyce's excellent try for Bristol Bears last weekend. I know they're playing right now and it's not being covered, but you don't see that. Whereas like Cardiff have got a contract negotiation coming up now, and there's been about 3 articles about that. We don't get the same from the women's side and the women's coverage, and even the way the WRU handle the social media for the women's, yes, all right, with all this coming out, it makes more sense. But the first post they put about this warm up with Scotland was the team announcement, and I checked, and that was the very first. We had a player having their 50th cap in the game against.
Oh my god!
So it wasn't the Italy game. It was the
game before.
It was
the Japan game. It was the Japan game, not the Italy game, wasn't it? It was the last game of WXV.
No, it
Yes,
was the
and
game
then
before,
And then
It
they
was the Japan
celebrated
game.
it at the Italy one.
Oh,
they
it was the Italy
celebrated
game.
it. Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
But they didn't even mention that. Like, we had a series of posts with Alan Jones. First of all, reached Richie McCall's record with his British and Irish Lions and Wales caps. We then had one when he broke it outright with Wales caps. And then we basically had one every time he got another cap.
I mean, they put a post about someone's birthday over someone getting a 50th cap. Like the randomness. Like, it's just so. Oh, so and so played for Wales in.
I don't expect much.
1980.
They only
I
just
was
started
going to say
tweeting
it's
the
some
stuff
guy
about
who
the
retired in
regions.
'93.
They've only just started posting stuff about the regions. So, do you know what? Fine.
So
Their
if
social
I'm
media's a
on
shambles.
Wales Online's rugby page at the moment. This is
God bless.
their rugby page.
Go on, share it for the
I was
YouTube
going to
audience.
say you
Sorry, apologies to the
put
audio
3
listeners.
ad
We've done a
blocks
lot of
on.
this, but-
So I've
I want to see a page that looks like it's
The-
vomited
I was going to
adverts
say
and videos.
the Wales.
But
The Wales.
Hang on, I just need my
Mecca.
glasses. Here we go.
so
Is
Well,
that
there we go.
real?
We've got
Are
two
these real
teams.
articles?
yeah, so I've scrolled down to before the women's stuff broke. So we've got something about the regions, which the Wales Online have been covering very closely. We've then got Sam
That's
Davis is
actually
having a
been
baby.
decent, to be fair.
Sam Davis
What?
is having a baby. Congratulations, Sam. It's not your fault, Sam. Sorry.
No.
Sorry to drag you into this. Joe Marler.
Famous Welsh rugby player Joe Marler.
Joe Marler says sorry about saying bad things about the hacker. Joe Marler says bad things about the hacker. I'm going in reverse chronological order. The list of players who aren't playing for Wales
That you can't
This is-
play for
This is
Wales.
literally I send Harley stuff like this all the time. This is the perverse backwards
Yeah.
journalism of rugby in Wales. Here's all the players who aren't playing for us. They will literally just
And
write
why?
articles
Wouldn't it be
like that.
great? Wouldn't it be great if this person played for Wales? They don't, but what if they did?
more players who aren't going to play for Wales, and then an old player passed away. And that's the summation of it. To be fair, that is less stuff about English rugby than there normally is. Normally, the majority
And
of
less Lewis
about
Rees
Hang on.
Zammit. There was a
That's it.
lot
Yeah.
of Lewis Rees Zammit.
There's always Lewis Rees on it. So was that page like just the rugby? Like,
That's just
Yeah.
if you put
Yeah, that's the
rugby,
rugby
in the
homepage.
website.
wow.
And
So
as you go
the-
down, it breaks down to individual regions, and then it
Brothers,
gets
it's
really,
not
really
great.
wishy-washy.
I don't believe there is
Wow.
a bespoke page for the women.
No.
There's Cardiff,
No, they
Dragons,
Which
Oh,
says
no.
it all.
They have the four pro
Scarlets.
clubs, and I
I've
think Team
tried
Wales.
many times.
Welsh Premiership, and I'm at the bottom
I
of the page.
don't think I've ever seen. I think I've only ever seen like Six
See,
Nations, or like the or the,
Just sorry
I've
on
always
that.
done that.
Sorry on that. I hadn't checked that before. Any suggestion now that they don't cover the women's rugby because there's no money in it? They've got a whole section on the Welsh Premiership, which is now, as of now,
Notoriously a moneymaker.
the
It's now
third
Division
division.
3.
It's now the third highest division in
Harley
Welsh
plays
rugby.
in that division.
So
No, I play in a really weird, obscure twos league.
Okay.
Okay,
So-
and it's the second
And
division
I'm
of
good
that.
at it.
I'm somehow like tier 11 of
Exactly.
Welsh
So,
rugby.
And I play most of the back row.
so the
I'm an entire back 5 forward and have played
I
the wing
know.
this year. So
I mentioned this before we came on. So I was working out how many rugby journalists are there in Wales actually.
Four.
So you got Steph Thomas and Ben James for Wales Online. You've got Matt Southcombe, who now works for ITV, so he's not
but he's
technically.
probably a sports journalist in general
Yeah.
now, really. He
So now
covers
no longer
their
a
sports
Welsh
section.
You've
He is very good, though, to be fair.
You've got Simon Thomas, who's still knocking around. He's not working for Wales Online anymore. He's kind of, I don't know if he's a solo thing, but he's not
I
for a
think
major
mostly
outlet.
freelance, but he
think
is
he's
very Cardiff
freelance.
focused now. He's now gone leaned fully into his Cardiff roots, which I love.
And then
same.
Simon,
you've got
please come on Cardiff Central if you are listening.
you've got Scrum 5. Now, Scrum 5 doesn't know what it is at the moment. It's having a massive identity crisis. They've just posted a clip of Mike Bubbins interviewing Sam Warburton. Mike Bubbins, who doesn't watch regional rugby,
Yep.
and
Sam Warburton, who is very retired.
and
But go
Sam
on.
Warburton, who is employed by TNT to cover English rugby.
And is a Cardiff board member, but seems to hate
Cardiff.
everything about Cardiff rugby right now.
And then you've got Lauren Jenkins, who we all think is fantastic, but at the moment it seems to be constrained to be just a presenter and nothing more. I think we all agree she's capable of more than that. She's doing touchline
Agreed.
interviews on
And
S4C
has
for SRC games, put it that way. And Gareth
Waste of their
Rhys-Owen,
talents.
Gareth Rhys-Owen, who is a presenter. But those 5 names that I've mentioned, 99% of all content in that Welsh rugby fans receive comes from one of those 5 people. And we've just covered the Wales Online issue, and we know that the Wales Online journalists have got very specific personal agendas because they tell us about them constantly in their opinion pieces. And once you're outside of those, you're into the English press. You've got someone like Alex Bywater, who works for the Daily Mail, who mostly covers English rugby. And then you've got
is probably more Welsh focused, but again, I think he's still Times.
Yeah. So
And then we do have
and the
people
thing
like
is,
Fee Thomas, who
if
honestly
this
gets most of the
Or
stories.
Beth Fisher.
if the story is if the story is, oh, the Telegraph had an exclusive on it, therefore we couldn't get into, there's nothing. I'm sure this isn't the only thing, right?
You could
Like,
you could talk to one of them.
you couldn't have-
literally a player.
You couldn't have done anything at all. You couldn't have talked about the women's team at all because of the
I don't
Telegraph
think this is
investigation.
proprietary.
You couldn't have interviewed any of the players. You couldn't have done this, that, or the other. That's hard to
We've done-
buy.
But we've done more than, because at least we tweet at the players and try to get responses. Like, what are you?
Yeah, we
And
got
if
quoted
any
by
current
That's kind of
players
that's kind of throwing me. How are you saying that you're
It's-
trying? And
Just want to clear the floor a second. If any current players or past players do want to comment and they just want someone to spout out, we'll keep names. Obviously, we'll keep anonymity if needed. But let's be honest, we're not losing anything if the WRU don't want to talk to us. They don't talk to us anyway. We're only a small fan podcast.
and it's actually a real boon for us. So yeah, if any family or players are listening, we have
So-
nothing to lose, and nobody believes us anyway.
So the one of the big
That's a tagline.
takeaways from this is that
I believe you,
is
Julia. I
anyone-
believe it.
You're the only
What-
one.
One of the big takeaways from this has been who's holding the WRU to account for actually making changes. They say there's something in the BBC report that says the Welsh government, which was heavily critical of the WRU following last year's misogyny scandal, and they'll be
Another
heavily
one.
critical for next year's as well, says it
Oh,
is
God.
concerned by the latest allegations
You all misogynistic. Crisis. Woohoo. Sorry.
and was looking to urgently meet with the WRU. A spokesperson for the Welsh government said, "We would always expect our national sporting bodies to lead by example." For me, one of the things that triggered me when I was reading all of this was when the WRU said, "We are conducting an internal review." Not good
We've
enough,
heard
that
not
before.
acceptable.
We've heard that before.
Not good enough, not acceptable
Yep.
on any level.
Not the investigators you
you were-
have.
You were supposed to do
I
the
know.
review to end all reviews last year, and here we are again, bullying, misogyny, blah 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 blah.
The
all
one
the
that we
things,
still didn't even get
blackmail.
the full report from. But
Yep.
Apparently there was a review previously that no one ever saw the light of day. It was hidden. It was swept under the carpet. So to say, don't worry, we're doing a review, reassures absolutely no one. If you're marking your own homework, we're not interested. We don't trust you, essentially, is where we are. So to put that out as a statement, I think the disrespect to the fans to say that is off the charts, frankly. Okay, so just to finish on the journalism thing, my final point on that is I don't think that the journalism of rugby in Wales is doing Welsh rugby any favours, particularly at the moment. Like I said, there's too few journalists, and the journalists that there are have their agendas that they are sticking to, and there's not enough breadth to the topics that they are covering, in my opinion. Just going to some news that's kind of broke previously a week ago, was some new appointments by the WRU regarding the pathways, and it was revealed that Ashley Beck was appointed to be a pathway coach, to which the official podcast account initially responded, "Oh, so that means Bristol and Thunder is getting a new head coach."
Not
No.
quite.
Ashley Beck, and just to be said, we're going to be talking about the situation involving Ashley Beck here.
Didn't say the magic word.
There is nothing, and no one on this pod has anything against Ashley Beck. We're just going to be talking about the situation that Ashley Beck finds himself in.
Not personal at all.
And we do know that in a lot of these situations, and we should just say this across the board, we do know in a lot of these situations, especially as we dig into more and more about how dysfunctional WRU is, we understand that individual people probably don't have a lot of say in a lot of we're not coming after you, I promise.
So Ashley Beck is, as of now, the coach of the women's pathway, and as far as we can tell, based on what we've been able to look up, the only coach in the women's pathway. He is also the head coach of Bristol Thunder. He is also an assistant coach to the under-20s. Julia, why did we find this so annoying?
Because those are 3 jobs. And it's really more, and even if you do break down into it, and it turns out that if you break it down hour by hour, that this person does make up whatever you consider a normal work week, whether it be 40 hours, 50 hours, whatever, even if it does break down to all of that, you can't really give yourself to all 3 of those jobs. There's a reason why they aren't all one job. There are other people who are participating in all 3 of the things that you listed, but ultimately to give one person the responsibility of all of those, now that we know what we do about how WRU operates and how they assign blame, if I were to be extremely cynical, I would say, maybe they're just doing this so that later on, if things fail, they can pin this on him. They always want somebody to pin it on. Those are 3 things that, according to WRU themselves, are big focuses on how to make Wales win, or whatever we saw in that PDF that we did a few episodes ago. That is part of the giant Wales plan to get better by whatever year. But even if he succeeds, and success would be hard to measure for having 3, what are at least a little bit different jobs. It would be hard to gauge success in any one of them, and if any one of them fails, there will be a cascade effect. So I'm just kind of scared. Because it seems like another effort of laziness by WRU. Maybe it's not, but it would take a little bit more time to maybe look for more people, maybe look for women who have come through the pathway. God knows there are several of them coaching right now.
Well, this comes to a wider point about why are there no women's coaches in women's rugby?
Exactly, we can go in there.
In Wales.
Well, anywhere.
And it is anywhere. And there are, and how come they've left? How come Rachel Taylor is coaching in England? Why can't we have her coaching?
So I just want to address the chap who tried to convince us that actually Ashley Beck was doing this job all along, and this isn't a new job. Congratulations, you successfully have been living rent-free in my head ever since you said that to me. So I just want to read verbatim what the WRU said. The Welsh Rugby Union has boosted its national pathways with 2 new key appointments, and then they go on to say in the main article, as the new women's performance pathways coach, Beck's role will see him work closely with a network of player development centres to oversee the development of a portfolio of players, as well as return to his head coach role with Bristol Thunder for a 2nd season and work as assistant with Wales under-20s.
Which during the Celtic Challenge will be a full-time job. That's the whole point of the Celtic Challenge.
Yes. Working with a network and developing a portfolio sounds like very different skills to being a head coach, just to my basic understanding. And I will say that in the same article, it's announced that the men's pathway is getting a specific coach for, let me just check exactly what it is. It is for scrummaging and throwing, which is a similar skill apparently. Whereas the women's pathway is just getting a coach. And this,
I'm pretty sure that they're saying the tweet women's for the women's pathway, that one. But
Right, and I
want to bring up one huge conflict of interest here, or one huge potential. So Ashley Beck is going to observe the pathway of all women's players across all these things, and he's going to be the head coach of one of 2 teams.
Yeah, I thought that.
that will act as
Now, obviously, for Huw, brilliant being Scarlets, and they've basically adopted Brithon. Sharon and myself are Cardiff, and we've effectively adopted Gwalior because they're based at Cap and whatever.
That's what they told us to do.
It's admittedly this should be Dragons as well, but the only home game played at Dave Parade was the Brithon game. But that's bizarre by the by. You can see it, and as a double jobbing, I kind of get it. There are certain things you can double job on, like the Wales under-20s aren't necessarily running the same time as the women, so you can flitter between the two. I mean, Griff Rees is the academy manager of Cardiff. He's also director of rugby of Cardiff's second team, the Racks. But that actually, when you think of
Even
it,
that
makes sense.
Even that
kind of makes more
the
sense.
Rags to delete the thing, so you can see the logical flow. But if you're trying to run all the different hubs and also supposedly coaching, so you're doing the admin, you're doing the coaching, you're coaching this team here, but not
you're
this team.
deciding who is in the
Not this team.
portfolio
You
while
team,
you
but not
choose
that
a team.
But you've got to look after those players, and then you're going to coach all the young men. Let's be fair.
When?
Plenty of us, when we're working, if we get given more than about 2 or 3 different jobs to run at a time, we have to turn around our boss and say, whoa, hold up, right. You want this, you want this, you want this, and you want this, right?
Which do you want?
I've got to learn to prioritize, and then that last one is not going to get it, because even the best multitaskers will overload at some point.
Everything.
And I know I'm gesticulating more than normal. I'm sorry for those watching on YouTube.
Yeah.
I swear it's it's a cost cutting
super
thing.
quick, super quick. Yeah, it is. What was that grant that all of the home unions got to employ coaches?
The share of the giant fund, and I don't.
Yeah, who was
can't remember what it's called.
Everyone got like
is it
a
HSBC?
share of 3 or 4 million pounds.
It's a share of 3 million, and it's $1 million to each nation. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah.
And the WRU said they were going to spend that on pathway coaches, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So they have appointed Ashley Beck and Mark Breeze. Ashley Beck, who was already working for the WRU as head of Brithon Thunder, and Mark Breeze, who was already working for the WRU as referee development officer. So
right.
Well, he's doing a fucking fantastic job, but judging by some of those.
Yeah.
Don't get me started on that.
So they've spent the money on
Evans.
people who already worked for them, and the cost cutting, saving time. It goes back to what was said in that review, that there is conflicting ideas of how to develop a pathway and how to develop women's rugby. That whole point about they didn't anticipate the growth of women's rugby, so
that is
or really well. So what I understood from that is we didn't read the room, and then when everyone was like, "Oh my god, the room is really dope. You should come check it out," they're like, we didn't have to look into it.
So
no, that is how. What do you mean you didn't?
We thought this would be a
the Olympics
fad,
were
like
in
flared
July.
jeans.
Yeah, exactly. We thought this would be a fad. The whole. Yeah, I'm going to refer to some things that I tweeted now. So just to summarize, I don't know who wants to summarize on the whole Ashley Beck situation. Ideally, Brithon Thunder should be looking for a new coach, right? Not because of anything bad that Ashley Beck has done, but because as development coach, he should be too busy, right?
Yeah,
it should be Tipperick because he liked it so much.
This is nothing to do with an individual. This is more the WRU trying to basically lumber more and more stuff onto people.
Yep.
But I mean, all right, maybe they have got some coaches and plan. They just haven't signed on the line, and they just want to get some good news out. Which clearly they needed to get something vaguely good out because all this other stuff was coming. But it just seems not thought through. And I'll be honest, this has been an issue I've had with the women's program for the last year or so. Is things don't seem thought through. They've brought through all these contracts. Great. It gave the players a boost. It made, a bit like with the island, you show these players a modicum of a hint that you actually give a shit, even if you don't, which clearly they don't seem to. They're all going to play for you, and they will play better than they possibly can. Like one of Gatlin 1.0's biggest things was he got teams believing that he would run. He got teams running through brick walls because they believed he was going to run through a brick wall for them. Don't know how well it's going to work given some of his recent comments, but well, that's by the by. And then it stopped, and then we got to WXV1. And we're going to hear this. I'm going to go through this argument again because it clearly has not gotten through to people who need to hear it. And I hope people start sharing this with people if they know anyone who does need to hear this. They stopped. And they thought, right, we were physical enough to deal with the second half of the WRU table. We're going to go to WXV1 to work out what we need to improve next. We worked out what we needed to improve next. We need to be fitter to run our defensive system so that we don't get cut up out wide. We need to work on our skills so that we can actually do something more than so that when we're up against a pack who's unequal to ours, we can't just steamroller them. And that did. We got to Six Nations, and none of that happened.
Didn't work.
Then we got to Spain, and we were lucky. We got into WXV2, and we thought, right, now you've got the summer because you're essentially contracted. You're not playing PWR now. You've got effectively you're employed. You've got the whole summer to work on this. You could do this as a pre-season. You can work on basic skills. You don't even have to do a contact session. And then we got to the Scotland game, and we were humiliated because we didn't work on the things that we needed to work on back the year before. Then we got to and 2 weeks later, we had the Australia game. And by hook or by crook, the players were like, yeah, let's get this because we want to go into WXV proving ourselves.
Momentum, yeah.
And that seems off the players' back. Then we got to WXV. We got absolutely transport-frustrated because they actually had plans hidden. They didn't have to give every last thing to themselves in that game.
Them. I think they did.
Then
Yeah, Joe Yap is not a fool, is she? And I think that first game, Australia were actually lost it rather than Wales won it. I know we scored in the last minute and all that kind of stuff, but Australia should have beaten us, really. Yes. And I think that they just learned from it like a proper professional team would do.
Team.
Yeah. To just kind of draw a line under this bit. So these quotes from Nigel Walker have resurfaced. These are from 2022. These have been tweeted by Katie Sands, who now works for ITV, I believe. So she tweeted, if money were no object, we would have 40 players on full-time contracts. Of course we would, but we live in the real world. We've gone further than we thought we would when we originally came to this process. That was in 2022. Less than 3 years later, 37 contracts have been handed out. So that's something of a backward step on that. And then he also said, I can scroll down quickly enough, it doesn't mean it'll have the most money or the most players on contracts, but in terms of ethos around the program and performance being at the heart of everything that we do, it will be the best program in the world, and we're committed to doing that. And that's what he said in 2022. And so the WRU are currently boasting about how much money they've spent on the contracts. And the WRU internal report, as I said a moment ago, says strongly differing reviews about how to develop women's rugby in Wales. From my point of view, I've gotten the vibe since we've been doing this show that where the WRU is doing women's rugby because it has to. It's thought by some people that part of the reason that South Africa did not get the Rugby World Cup last time around was because it did not have an appropriate women's rugby program, which it is now fixing. The Celtic Challenge has been set up with World Rugby's money, not with the WRU's money. Those coaches that we spoke about earlier have been appointed using the money that they got from a grant that everybody got. Well, at least that's what it appears to be to my eye.
Whose money are you throwing in?
And there is no plan. There is no original thought. There is no critical thinking. There is, oh crap, everyone else is giving contracts to the women. We better give contracts to the women. Where, like I said in the previous pod when we discussed the contracts, I would rather not give contracts to the women and put that same money into the pathways, which is what Scotland have just done. They've given 45 young players support to get through academy levels. So yeah, it's clear to me that we're nowhere even close to a strategy for women's rugby in Wales. Like we said, Julie, we've spoken about the USA is creating a domestic league that may also benefit Canada. We don't know. That is looking about building from the bottom up.
Every other nation that is in, okay, that's an overstatement, but certainly, and I'm thinking specifically about USA and to a lesser extent Canada, but definitely USA. You know, I have a lot of problems with USA Rugby as an organization. Everybody would say that about their national union, but what I do appreciate here, and what is at the crux of that discussion you and I had, is the understanding that in the beginning, you are going to put a lot of money in and you're not going to see a lot of money out. You'll probably not see any money out. That's not the way any private business works. That's not the way any NGO works. That's not the way any organization works. And I understand that WRU really, really, really wants us to know that they're cash strapped. And it's very hard for them, and they simply don't have as much money as everybody else, by the way. Same with Scotland and Ireland, but it doesn't seem to matter to them. It is true and unavoidable that you're going to have to make an investment. And WRU really likes to tout what investments they make. And in fairness, considering they haven't seemed to get like an actual public relations person, they're very good with making statements about the wonderful, huge investment. They're very Trumpian, very huge investments they've made. We're going to make the best contracts in the world. You know, we would love to be able to do this, but we simply can't. We bought a hotel and now we're building a skywalk, but we simply can't. There are a lot of excuses, and a lot of not understanding how building works. And at one point, you can't blame your 19-year-old players. You can't blame your 35-year-old men's players. You can't blame people for trying to make a living off of this. WRU needs better management. We're not the first pod to say it. Everybody says it. I'm one of the last people to understand it even. However, it's very obvious on paper. This is just kind of a symptom of that. I feel like we have such a need to pathologize all of this because we really want to make sense out of how badly they've cocked this up. But it really might just be that, like, they don't understand business. I don't know.
No, they don't. I don't think.
I don't know.
The WRU, honestly,
please take it.
For decades now, I've lived through the WRU just not having a clue what they're doing. Yes. You know, and
this was supposed to change.
Exactly.
And it hasn't, because they didn't get a CEO who could.
But God knows you make so much noise about how much you're going to change.
It has to be a professional, but like I just feel like
wasn't that the whole point of Abby Tierney? Wasn't the entire point of Abby Tierney is that she's some business genius?
Don't really know what the point of that.
I don't.
She's good at changing culture.
Oh, is she? She made it worse. You changed it all right.
So to wrap up then, final point, Sian, this is something that you put in the chat as a potential question for a guest, but I'm going to turn it back on yourself. What can fans do?
It's a very good question. I mean, back in, I think it was 2001, there was I think it was before David Moffat came in, there was so much hatred towards the WRU. It was a bit like now with the regions, and there was a whole campaign, and it was started on Glad message boards. This was the days of message boards before Twitter. And there was a whole people
still exists.
We'll leave a note in the description for everybody under 25.
Yeah, what a message board is. All right, grandma.
Go on.
We used to protest. We started protesting. We had posters. Change did come eventually when David Moffat came in, and he was a very polarizing kind of guy. Obviously, they brought the regions in, but we kind of needed that change.
Yeah, you needed someone to not compromise anymore. You needed someone to say, "This is what we're doing."
He absolutely pissed so many people off.
Organizational change is very rarely comfortable.
Right, you need that, and you know, as civilians, as Julia likes to say, we have to make. We have to make. I don't know if it does feel right now that no one's really holding the WRU to account. We need to, does the Welsh government need to step in? As fans, the WRU takes us for granted, and I think they have done for forever, right? And I think there's got to be a time when I was at the football on Tuesday night, and honestly, I was literally thinking, this is all before this kicked off, I feel like more at home now at the Wales women football matches.
They want you more. It feels less adversarial. It truly feels adversarial.
There's a strategy, and I feel like
rugby fan.
I feel like the players love playing for Wales. They obviously love it. They love the environment. They're having a really good time. I mean, it's not just about that. They've got a coach who's really articulate and coherent, and she knows how to run a professional sporting team. She knows how to coach women at professional sporting level. She's made a massive difference.
Has done it herself.
So,
yep.
Has done it herself. Yeah. I don't know. There's just so many parts of that. And I'm just thinking, I wish the WRU had that. And I do think the WRU are at risk at losing people like me.
Yes. And on top of all of this, they also, and we're not going to get back into it because I know we're wrapping up, but they did have the audacity to trot out Hannah Jones to come say, like, please don't leave us. Like, please give us space. We're going to come do better. When, by the way, for all the jokes that we've made or whatever, like, I will come defend her.
But this is the thing, though. I want to support the players. I don't want to be like, I'm not going to go to the games because I want to support the players, because at the end of the day, they are who we always joke about it. They're our friends. We love them. Yes. But it's so hard right now because you're kind of feeling like they're not going to. It feels like nothing's going to change.
Who's going to protect them? We can't, and we seem like the ones who want to protect them most. And it feels very demoralizing to feel that way.
It's getting to the point now where people are talking about, I'm not going to go to games. I'm not going to wear my Wales jersey. I'm not going to buy any merch.
I feel like it. Which is
really far for a Wales fan. And I say that as somebody who was an outsider and is now an insider. It's hard to get somebody. No. It's hard to get somebody to stop loving Wales.
It's extremely tough. And I have to say,
you really have to work hard.
When this news all came out, and I had thoughts, and I messaged Harley. I had thoughts of, I don't know if I want to show my support for Wales at this point in time because of all the things that are going on, not just with the women's game, with other stuff as well. And it just makes me think about my granddad, and that's extremely difficult for me. And that's the situation that the WRU are putting fans in now. And it shouldn't, this is our hobby. We're supposed to be doing this for fun, and it's not fun. So we're going to end it there. It's a very difficult part, a lot of emotions. I'm pausing just to remind my friend and colleague Harley he needs to have his finger over the stop record button. And thank you to my panelists here to speak through this. We do intend on coming back as the Women's Pod to speak about women's rugby in general. We want to really get a highbrow conversation going, talking about women in rugby, women's sport, talking about topics that no one else talks about, to really get in depth. We want to do previews of the Celtic Challenge. We want to talk about the Celtic Challenge. So we will come back and we'll do that. But it was important for all of us to talk about this topic as well. And it has been difficult, but as people who have a women's rugby podcast, it would have been incredibly wrong for us to not. So thank you for everybody for listening. It's been a long one, so appreciate it. And we shall speak to you next time. Cheers.
Yeah.
See ya.